Hey everyone, welcome to Mercurial Astrology. I am your host Tamirius, and I am here to dive into the fascinating world of Horary Astrology. In this video, I will use a series of techniques to demonstrate how to find missing objects. Horary Astrology is hands down my favorite branch of astrology, especially for locating mislaid objects or people. I appreciate how specific and outcome-based it is. But before I dive into the horary example for this episode, I am going to go over some useful information for how to approach the sector of horary. Keep in mind that there is much more to learn and much more specific things to know for finding missing objects. So what I'm going to share with you is basically only scratching the surface, but it provides a wealth of information for how to apply some of the most basic techniques for locating missing objects. So here are some guidelines that I pulled from Anthony Lewis's book on Horary Astrology. He has an amazing book that basically has a compilation of information from practicing astrologers as well as a plethora of charts that demonstrate how to find missing objects. So I found this to be particularly useful, especially in the example that I'm going to go over with you all today. So the main thing you want to do is identify the significators. So before you can find something lost, you have to define exactly what it is so that you can know what significators to use. What that means is typically when someone comes to you and you don't have any relation to them, they are going to be represented by the first house. And so the sign that is rising is ruled by a planet. And with horary astrology, we always use the traditional rulerships, meaning we use Saturn to represent Aquarius, not Uranus. We use Jupiter to represent Pisces, not Neptune. And we use Mars to represent Scorpio and not Pluto. But the sign that is rising and the planet that rules that sign is going to represent the querent. Now, the second house represents our property, our possessions, and the things that we own. So the second house ruler is going to be representing the missing object. In addition to that, the moon is also going to represent the missing object along with the planetary hour. If the significator is in the first house, so meaning if the ruler of the second or if the planetary hour, or if the ruler of the part of fortune, which also represents mislaid objects, if that is in the first house, or in the same sign as the first ruler, or in a sign ruled by the first ruler, the missing thing is with the querent or in the part of the querent's house that he or she spends most of their time. A similar principle applies to the other angular houses. So remember, the angular houses are the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. And those are the pivots of the chart. And so, again, when you are looking for a missing item and the significator for the missing item falls in an angular house, that is showing you that the item is nearby, and a lot of times it is showing a strong likelihood of recovery. But again, if the significator for the item is in the 7th house, it can show where the item is in the part of the house where the partner spends a lot of their time. If it's in the 4th house, it can show where it's in the older part of the house or where the oldest person spends most of their time. And if it's in the 10th house, it can signify that the item may be in your office or in your workspace. If the significator is in a very early or late degree, or if it's basically entering into a house, like it's kind of like right on the borderline between two houses, it can show where the item may be near a door or entryway, or between two rooms, or it may have fallen behind something. We also look to see how close the moon is to the first house ruler, because again, remember, the moon is also representing the mislaid object. So if they are in the same quadrant, then that typically is a good sign because it shows that the item is near them or it is in or about the house. But if you see where the moon is like far away from the first house ruler and it's like in a totally different quadrant, the opposite side of the house, that can sometimes show where the item may be far away from the owner. Doesn't mean you won't receive the item back, because in some cases, you may have lost it and somebody may be holding it for you and you can maybe find it that way. But Again, that just gives us some information about how close the object is. You want to look at the most recent aspect from the ascendant ruler because that will show the person who lost it and it may describe what happened. And then there are some chief signs of non-recovery, which are Saturn, Mars, or the South Node in the second house. If the second house ruler is in the 8th house or combust, meaning it is within 15 degrees of the sun, or if the second ruler is applying to the 8th house ruler in any aspect, that can show where the item may not be recovered. Now, in terms of combustion, I have learned through experience that doesn't always mean you will not find the object. It can just mean that the object is being overshadowed by something more powerful and prominent, such as it may be underneath something major that is blocking it from view, hiding it from view. And again, with Horary Astrology, particularly with locating missing objects, you will learn that it's almost like a puzzle that you're putting together. And the more significations that you have for something and the more connection you see between those things and the significator for the querent, the more likely it is that you'll find that object. Here are some more guidelines for missing objects. So if the object belongs to the querent, then you'll take the second house. If it belongs to the brother, you'll take the 4th house. And if it belongs to the child, the 6th, or the wife or the spouse, the 8th. The rationale behind this is that the 3rd house represents your brother. So if your brother comes to you or let's just say you were borrowing your brother's watch and you lost it. Well, that watch does not belong to you. So you have to go to the house that represents the brother, which would be the 3rd house. And then you have to look at the 2nd house from the 3rd, which in this case would be the 4th house, to represent that watch. And a similar principle applies to if it belongs to your child, which your child is represented by the 5th house, so their property is represented by the 6th house, and your spouse's property is represented by the 8th house because it is the 2nd house from the 7th. If the Lord of the 2nd, as described previously, is in an angle, it is in the house of the owner. And if the Lord of the 2nd is in the ascendant, it is in a part of the house where he or she spends most of their time. And if it is in the 10th, it is in a hall or dining room. But if the querent is a mechanic or a tradesman, it is in his shop. And if the Lord of the 2nd is in the 7th, it is where the wife or the spouse mostly works. So again, just reinforcing what we just went over. If a fortunate planet is rising, such as Venus or Jupiter, or the Lord of the 2nd is in the ascendant, the item will be found again. The same is true if the Lord of the 1st is in the 2nd, or the moon is in trine with the Lord of the 2nd, or the Lord of the 4th is in good aspect to the Lord of the 1st and the 2nd and well dignified. The 4th house has to deal with buried treasure in general, so we also do look at the 4th house in this ruler to represent missing objects because it can represent things that are hidden or undercover. The 4th house is known as the subterranean angle for that reason. The quality of the place where the article is may be known by the sign that the significator is in and the sign on the cusp of the 2nd house. If it is in an air sign, it is in the topmost part of the house. If it or in the top room. If it's in a water sign, it may be near a wash house, a sink, pool, bathroom, or on the floor because water is associated with the ground. And if it is in a fire sign, it may be near fire or a chimney or near a wall. And if it's in an earth sign, that also can represent where the item may be on the ground or in the floor. If the significator is going out of one sign and into another, it is behind something or falling down between two rooms or near a door or threshold joining two rooms. This same guideline may also hold true if the significator is going out of one house and into the next. In addition, I have previously quoted Alfred Lavoie's observation of a strong correlation between extremely late or early degrees in a sign and the missing article behind being near a door, window, or gate, or in a box or package, and about to be moved to a new location. According to Lavoie, the same principle applies when the ruler of the second house is within 2 degrees of any cusp. And to that, I'll add that when it comes to the other houses, such as the cadent houses, which are the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th, those houses, we don't like for significators to fall in those houses because it can indicate where the item has changed locations, because all of the cadent houses has to deal with the movement and travel because they are falling away from the angles. The succeeding houses, the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th, are not necessarily bad, but it can show where the item may be near you or near your home, but it may not be in the house. So better than cadent houses, but still not as strong as angular houses. And this is a very important diagram or table for anyone that is interested in astrology, especially when it comes to practicing and applying techniques of traditional astrology. You really want to be familiar with this table, mainly when it comes to the rulerships, the detriment, the fall, and the terms and the faces. Triplicity is important as well. All of this is important because what it does is it shows affinity for each other. And I'll get more into that, but on a basic level, it is important that you know the traditional rulerships of each sign. So, for the example that I'm going to be using today, my supervisor lost her badge while she was working and she could not find it. And so she, knowing that I'm an astrologer, asked me if I could cast a chart in order to find her badge, because the badge is very important, because without our badge, we can't get into the building, we can't get into our office, and it can just be a nuisance. So just a little background on my job. I work in the healthcare field and we do a lot of traveling. So we're always going to different cities, different counties, and providing healthcare services to people. And so we're always on the go. So if we lose something while we're at work in a different city, it can be basically really bad because we may have lost the item in a town 60 or 80 miles away from where we are. And so she thought that she lost her badge in the parking lot of the city that we were in that day. Now, on that particular day, we had like 2 events that we had to be at, and I was not able to make the first one. So I wasn't there with her when she lost her badge. But when I saw her for the second event that evening, that's when she told me what happened, and she asked me if I could basically cast a chart to locate it. So because she is my supervisor, she is going to be represented by the 10th house, because the 10th house represents the supervisor or your boss. And that means that the 11th house, which is her second house, is going to represent her badge. And so we see that Jupiter is representing her because Sagittarius is on the 10th house, and Saturn is representing her badge. In addition to that, the moon in Aries is representing her badge. Venus is the planetary hour, so Venus is representing the badge, as well as the part of fortune and its ruler. So the first thing I noticed was that Jupiter was in the 4th house, which is her derived 7th house, and Jupiter is retrograde. So what that can signify is that when a planet that represents the Aquarian is retrograde, it can demonstrate where they may need to retrace their steps. And because Jupiter is in the house diametrically opposed to the house that she is in, that represents her, which is the 10th house, it can show where the item is opposite to where she thinks it is. So I knew by that, when I saw this, I knew it was not in the parking lot. So I was able to gain some reassurance for that, because the first thing I like to do is see if the object is going to be recovered before I start looking at where it could be, because sometimes the chart will demonstrate that the item is just not going to be found and there's no use in even wasting your time trying to pinpoint where it is because it's just not going to be found. But as you can see, that isn't the case here. So furthermore, with Jupiter being retrograde, that can represent where she would be wise to retrace her steps, and it is likely that if she retraces her steps, she will find the object. Now, as I stated, Saturn is ruling her derived second and third house, because Aquarius is on her third house cusp. It's the 12th house cusp for the chart in general. But again, we're looking at this chart from her perspective. So Saturn is going to be representing her second and third house. And Saturn is in Pisces retrograde in the first house, but her derived fourth house. So that angularity is a really good thing, and it suggests that she will find the object. Also, when the significator of the missing object is retrograde, as you can see here with Saturn, that is actually a good sign. Now, in traditional astrology, we tend to not like retrogradation. We don't like it when planets go retrograde, but there is one exception, and that is when the significator for a missing object is retrograde, because it can show where that item is moving back towards her. And also, as you can see, Saturn is just crossing over into the ascendant, so it's in between two boundaries, which can represent where the item, the badge in this case, may be in between, maybe in two locations, or it may have fallen in between something. Additionally, Pisces is a bicorporal or double-bodied sign, which can indicate that the item is in a compartment or it is in two locations at once. Another good sign is that Saturn is in Pisces, and Pisces, if you remember earlier, one of the things that can show where the object will be recovered is if the significator for the missing object is in a sign that is naturally ruled by the planet that represents the querent. And so Jupiter rules two signs, Sagittarius and Pisces. And so that is increasing the connection between her and the badge, and it is showing that it will be recovered. Now, I told her that she should check her vehicle, she should check her car for the badge, because Saturn is ruling her second house and third house. The third house represents vehicles, travel, documents, and communication. And it also showed where the badge had changed locations. So again, it wasn't in the parking lot, it changed locations. And I told her to check her vehicle, and I told her that it probably had fallen behind something, and that it may have been in an object used for travel. And I also told her that it might be like low to the ground or on the floor, because Saturn is in Pisces. Pisces rules the feet, and so that can show where the item is, like, on the floor near the feet. And then also Venus, because the planetary hour is Venus, Venus is also representing the badge. And as we can see here, Venus has left the 8th house and is just entering the 9th house. And so that can show once again where the item is in two locations and that it changed locations. And so that was further information. And Venus is at the 27th degree of Scorpio. And then we have the part of fortune. The part of fortune is in the 6th house, another cadent house, which again shows that the item changed locations. And the sun rules the part of fortune, and it is at 23 degrees of Libra in the 8th house, basically leaving the 7th house and going into the 8th house. So again, another indicator that the item is in between something, in between a doorway or an entrance. And the 23rd degree of Libra, basically the last 15 degrees of Libra and the first 15 degrees of Scorpio, is known as the Via Combusta. So that's a section of the zodiac that is known as the flaming road or the path of darkness. And it can indicate where an item may have fallen behind something and is obscured from view. And it can represent where the item may be near something combustible. So that's what guaranteed for me that the item was in a vehicle, specifically her vehicle, because again, Saturn is in her derived fourth house, which means that it is in a location that is familiar to her. So she and then let's also talk about the moon. So the moon is on the world axis at 0 degrees of Aries. Aries is a cardinal sign and it's in an angular house. So I knew that she was going to recover it rather quickly, because when the moon is in an angular house and in a cardinal sign, it can show what things are going to flow, what things are going to, because the moon represents function and the flow of events. It's going to show what things are going to transgress rather quickly. So the moon is applying to Jupiter, which is the planet that represents her. It's applying towards a sextile to Jupiter. And Jupiter is also applying to the moon because Jupiter is moving backwards. And the moon is applying towards an opposition with the sun, which is ruling the part of fortune, which again is representing the badge. And so in Horary Astrology, particularly with missing objects, oppositions can be good because it can show where you will face off with something, where you will uncover something. So you will face off with the badge or whatever it is that you find it. Again, that's just been my experience. So what happened was the next day she looked in her car and she looked in the camper and she didn't find it. And so I guess she lost faith in what I told her, and she just went to HR to get a new badge. What happened was later that day, when she was taking the cart out of her trunk, it's a little wagon that we use to carry our materials, our medical materials, which again, I forgot to mention that I told her that the badge is near medicine because Neptune is also in the first house and it's rather close to Saturn and the moon, and Neptune represents medicine. And because we have a medical job, I remember I specifically told her to check near medicine. But what happened was when she went to take the wagon out of her car, she discovered that the ID had fallen in between the sides of the wagon and some of the products that were inside of the wagon. And so it ended up being spot on, and she found it exactly where I told her that she would. And she was excited, but not as excited as I was, because, when I do these type of readings for people, I'm putting my reputation on the line. I take it very seriously. So if I tell you you're going to find something and it's in this location, you're going to find it in that location. And if I see where you won't find it, I'll just be straightforward with you. So I just wanted to share that brief demonstration on how I was able to cast a chart in order to help her find her missing badge. Now, funny enough, her husband is a skeptic. So when she told him what happened, he basically told her that I stole her badge and hid it in the wagon and came up with this cockamamie story of where it was at, which is a bunch of bullshit. Skeptics of astrology really trip me out because they will jump across the moon in order to invalidate astrology. It's just the craziest thing ever. But nonetheless, Horary Astrology is fascinating, and I hope you all learned and gained something insightful from this video. So if you liked it and you enjoyed what I had to say, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe. And until then, next time.